On the evening of October 12, 1994, the marble corridors of Hotel Excelsior in Milan echoed with the quiet shuffle of guests returning from late dinners. But one man, Fahad Kamali, never returned to the lobby alive that night. Kamali, a known figure in shadowed intelligence dossiers, had checked into the hotel under a false name. He carried no luggage, only a battered leather satchel. Hours later, staff found his suite door ajar, curtains billowing, and silence pressing heavy. The body lay slumped across the bed, shoes still polished, shirt unbuttoned by hurried hands. At first glance, he looked like a businessman who succumbed to sudden heart failure. Yet unease hung in the air, sharper than perfume. Italian police arrived discreetly, cordoning off the 5th floor with whispers rather than alarms. Hotel guests peered from doors, sensing something extraordinary had pierced their mundane travel nights. The corpse belonged to someone far from ordinary. Within hours, the name slipped from police circles into the hands of foreign intelligence liaisons. This was not a tourist. This was Fahad Kamali, a Hezbollah operative linked to kidnappings of Westerners in Beirut. His presence in Italy raised alarms. Reporters were kept outside, pressing against glass doors. Inside, whispers multiplied. How had Kamali reached Milan undetected? Why had he chosen a luxury hotel? And most important, who had silenced him before questions could ever be asked? For European security officials, the death was not simply a homicide. It was an international alarm bell. Kamali was no fringe militant. He was a living archive of operations, networks, and money trails that stitched together East and West. His elimination on Italian soil triggered a frenzy. Was it a mafia settling scores? A rival faction in Hezbollah? Or was it something larger, an invisible hand shaping geopolitics, while leaving no fingerprints on the crime scene? American diplomats whispered concern. Kamali had once negotiated over hostages with quiet arrogance, controlling the lives of journalists and spies. His silence meant certain secrets, unspoken deals, ransom paths, hidden alliances, would never again surface to embarrass global powers. For Israel, however, his death meant something sharper. Kamali embodied the nerve center of Hezbollah's European outreach, a link between Middle Eastern militancy and continental safe havens. His removal was not justice. It was strategy, pure and calculated, beyond courtrooms. The stakes swelled further because Italy, a NATO member, now found itself hosting a silent battlefield. If Mossad had indeed struck, Rome could hardly admit it. If others had acted, the balance of covert power tilted ominously in Europe. What made the incident unforgettable was not merely that a man died in a hotel suite, it was that his absence threatened to unravel hidden arrangements, unmasking the perilous game played between terrorists, governments, and clandestine hunters operating beyond the law. Who had shadowed Fahad Kamali across borders, tracing his movements from the alleys of Beirut to the glittering boulevards of Milan? Was it a lone assassin with personal vengeance, or a state machine executing orders polished in secret chambers? Why was Kamali in Italy at all? Was he there to launder money through discreet banking networks, to meet an arms broker, or to negotiate a ransom in whispered tones over espresso? His mission died with him that night. Was Mossad's hand invisible behind the silken curtains of that suite? If so, why risk exposure in a NATO ally city? And if not Mossad, then which hidden rival dared extinguish one of Hezbollah's most useful operatives? Why now, in 1994, when the fragile Middle East trembled between war and uneasy diplomacy? Was Kamali targeted to sabotage peace overtures, or to signal a quiet message to factions planning their next kidnapping in Beirut's shadowed streets? And the deepest question of all, was this death a surgical act of justice, or the opening strike in a war that governments would never admit existed? In espionage, every corpse is a clue, but also a question. Fahad Kamali was born in 1962 in the southern Lebanese town of Nabatea, a place where stone houses clung to hillsides and the air carried the scent of olives and gunpowder. His earliest memories were shaped by war's persistent thunder. His father, a stern schoolteacher, tried to instill discipline and faith through long recitations of scripture. His mother stitched clothes for neighbors, her gentle presence balancing the iron rigidity of a household constantly haunted by economic scarcity. Childhood in Nabatea was no ordinary childhood. Israeli jets streaked overhead, militias paraded with rifles, and funerals passed daily. Kamali's games were not of marbles or kites, but of makeshift checkpoints, mimicking fighters he watched from dusty alley corners. By adolescence, he absorbed a world of contradictions. He excelled in mathematics, solving problems with remarkable clarity, yet he also sketched rifles into the margins of his notebooks. Teachers noted his silence, calling him the boy who listened more than spoke. His formative years coincided with Lebanon's descent into civil war. Bombardments reduced classrooms to rubble, pushing families into basements where stories of martyrdom, betrayal, and vengeance replaced fairy tales. Kamali's worldview fermented in that crucible of loss and defiance. He grew restless, often sneaking away to hear preachers denounce foreign occupiers. Those gatherings were more than sermons. They were seeds, planting in young listeners a sense of destiny. Kamali inhaled their words as if they were maps to his future. Unlike many of his peers, he was not reckless. He avoided petty fights, avoided narcotics, and kept meticulous notes of news reports. Friends described him as disciplined beyond his years, driven by an invisible agenda even as a teenager. By the time he turned 18, Lebanon was fractured, militias multiplying like shadows at dusk. Kamali stood at the edge of adulthood, in a nation where survival required allegiance, secrecy, and an unyielding will. His path toward militancy was not yet chosen. Kamali's ideology was shaped less by books than by funerals. He believed resistance was not a political option, but a sacred duty. He saw every invasion, every bombing, as proof that life under occupation demanded blood in return for dignity. He became fascinated with the writings of revolutionary clerics. Their fiery speeches spoke of divine justice, of sacrifice as currency for freedom. Kamali copied their words into journals, underlining passages that spoke of endurance, betrayal, and the immortality of martyrs. Yet beneath the zealot's rhetoric, he harbored eccentricities that humanized him. He collected fountain pens, insisting they revealed a man's character more than weapons. He polished shoes obsessively, declaring that even in war, one must never appear disordered. Food was another peculiarity. He despised sweets, claiming sugar dulled the mind, but adored bitter coffee brewed thick and black. Associates recalled he measured the grounds by weight, never guesswork, as though caffeine itself was a ritual of precision. Socially, he was reserved, almost severe, but prone to sudden bursts of humor. He would mimic politicians' speeches with uncanny accuracy, then return instantly to silence. These quirks made him both enigmatic and oddly magnetic, difficult for allies or enemies to dismiss. Kamali's habits reflected the paradox of his nature. A militant who prized discipline as much as secrecy, a believer who saw symbols in every object, and a man whose smallest quirks betrayed the meticulous strategist he would soon become. Among comrades, Kamali was known as Al-Thib, the wolf. The name captured his reputation for patience and cunning, a predator who watched silently before striking. Rivals used the moniker with equal fear, acknowledging the predatory calm in his movements. Western intelligence reports gave him another nickname, the Accountant of Hostages. He had once been spotted calculating ransom figures in neat columns, cross-checking every detail. For analysts, it symbolized his methodical approach to both money and blood. Yet privately, Kamali saw himself differently. He often told friends that he was merely a shadow in service of faith. He rejected titles of commander or leader, insisting he was a servant, though his pride betrayed deeper ambition. His self-image blended martyrdom and control. He spoke of destiny as if it were a ledger already balanced. He saw his role not as temporary rebellion, but as a historical inevitability. To him, nicknames were fleeting. The cause was eternal. By the early 1980s, Lebanon was unraveling. Israeli incursions grew relentless, militias splintered daily, and foreign powers carved influence with proxy fighters. For a restless youth like Kamali, neutrality was impossible. Each funeral procession became a recruitment speech written in smoke. Kamali's first step came not with a weapon, but with logistics. He ferried messages between clerics and local cells, memorizing routes, memorizing names. His sharp memory and calm demeanor earned trust. Soon he was indispensable as courier and confidant. Political sermons became his second classroom. He listened in crowded mosques where fiery voices linked faith with liberation. He did not interrupt, did not question. He absorbed. To Kamali, activism was not protest. It was preparation for something larger, inevitable. By 1984, he had joined a faction that would later merge into Hezbollah. He did not yet command, but he organized supplies, secured safe houses, and ensured fighters moved unseen. His fingerprints never appeared on weapons, only on lists and plans. What drew him deeper was not power but precision. Militancy offered structure amid chaos, rules amid rubble. His talent for detail, once devoted to mathematics, now mapped networks of sympathizers and donors. His evolution from student to operative was complete. Kamali's first brush with open illegality came in 1985. A Beirut warehouse raid uncovered caches of stolen passports and forged documents. Witnesses swore Kamali had overseen distribution, but when police arrived, he had vanished, leaving only coffee cups still warm. Later that year, his name surfaced again, this time tied to a kidnapping near West Beirut. A French journalist disappeared for 72 days, released only after negotiations. Though never charged, whispers in intelligence circles painted Kamali as the silent coordinator. His arrest finally came in 1987 during a crackdown in Tyre. Authorities stopped a van carrying explosives hidden under sacks of flour. Kamali was among the passengers. Unlike others, he neither panicked nor resisted, sitting calmly as officers searched. Interrogators described him as unnervingly composed. He admitted nothing, denied affiliations, and requested legal texts with almost academic politeness. After weeks of detention and under pressure from factions threatening reprisals, he was released. For Kamali, it was a rehearsal, not defeat. Each arrest, each brush with law enforcement, seemed to strengthen his aura rather than diminish it. To followers, he was the man who slipped through bars of law. To adversaries, he was the shadow always one step ahead. During a second arrest in 1988, Kamali was held in a makeshift detention center outside Sedan. Conditions were brutal. Flickering lights, endless interrogations, and the constant hiss of water pipes used for crude torture. His silence became his most powerful weapon. Later, Kamali would recount these episodes in whispers to recruits. He claimed interrogators beat him with cables, deprived him of sleep, and threatened his family. Whether embellished or true, such stories gave him stature as a man tested by fire. What mattered was not the accuracy, but the effect. Tales of Kamali's endurance spread, turning him into a symbol of resistance. Every scar became a sermon, every bruise a credential. To followers, pain had consecrated him as untouchable. Those months behind bars hardened his outlook. He emerged more disciplined, convinced that survival itself was proof of divine favor. For Kamali, prison was not humiliation, but initiation. A crucible that burned away hesitation and left only a sharpened, unbreakable resolve. By the late 1980s, Kamali's path converged with Hezbollah's expanding network. The group, forged from Iranian guidance and Lebanese fury, sought disciplined operators. Kamali, with his patience and meticulous nature, was not a foot soldier, but a strategist in waiting. He began in logistical cells, securing safe houses and arranging document smuggling. Colleagues noticed his ability to compartmentalize information, ensuring no operative knew the full picture. It was a method that made networks harder to dismantle and enemies slower to trace. As Hezbollah formalized, Kamali drifted into smaller splinter committees specializing in kidnappings. These cells functioned like shadows within shadows, reporting selectively upward. Kamali's gift for planning abductions without unnecessary violence elevated him to a quiet but trusted leadership role. There are reports he briefly considered founding an independent faction, a group that would combine political activism with targeted militancy. Yet pragmatism kept him tethered to Hezbollah, where resources flowed from Tehran and protection came from communal legitimacy. By 1990, Kamali was not just an operative, he was a node. His network reached smugglers, clerics, bankers, and street fighters. He had constructed a web that blurred lines between militancy, politics, and organized crime. His rise was unstoppable. Kamali's operations matured in the early 1990s. Smuggling routes stretched from Beirut to Cyprus, then into Europe. Cigarettes, weapons, even antiquities passed through his channels. Each shipment masked another, confusion layered like smoke. His genius lay in turning chaos into reliable profit. Kidnapping soon became his trademark. Westerners in Lebanon learned to live with sudden disappearances. Journalists, engineers, aid workers. Kamali treated each abduction like a chess match. Hostages were pawns, negotiations the board. He kept records of concessions won, ransoms paid, reputations scarred. Not all operations ended with release. Some victims vanished forever, their fates whispered in darkened rooms. Intelligence reports linked Kamali to at least 3 executions, though proof remained elusive. The ambiguity itself became his calling card. Fear thrives on uncertainty, not evidence. Killings escalated outside Lebanon, too. In 1992, a rival operative was found shot in Damascus. Weeks later, a Lebanese banker known for cooperating with foreign agencies disappeared in Cyprus. Both cases bore Kamali's signature. Clean planning, invisible fingerprints, only silence left behind. These acts were not random. Each smuggling scheme funded arms. Each kidnapping amplified leverage. Each killing silenced a threat. Kamali's rise was written not in speeches but in shadows, where every decision carried the weight of both profit and ideology. On March 18, 1991, a German aid worker vanished on the road from Tyre to Beirut. Kamali allegedly oversaw the abduction. The victim resurfaced 97 days later, pale and broken, traded for cash wired through labyrinthine European bank accounts. In July 1992, Kamali coordinated a smuggling convoy disguised as a Red Cross medical shipment. Inside the crates were dismantled rifles bound for Bekaa Valley camps. Italian customs nearly intercepted the cargo, but falsified paperwork allowed the trucks to disappear inland. October 1992 brought a darker chapter. A Lebanese businessman accused of feeding intelligence to Western embassies was abducted outside his home. His family received no demands. Weeks later, whispers spread that his body lay buried in a Bekaa orchard. On February 11, 1993, French police raided a Marseille apartment, seizing forged Syrian passports. Investigators traced the paper stock back to Kamali's Beirut network. He was never physically present, but every document bore his logistical fingerprints, consistent fonts, identical watermarks, precise numbering. The climax came in May 1994. A Saudi diplomat in Rome narrowly escaped a car bombing outside his residence. Italian investigators later found the explosive device mirrored components used in Bekaa training camps. Kamali's name, again, surfaced in whispers, but never in indictments. Each incident was a brushstroke in his criminal portfolio. Dates, places, methods, all meticulously chosen to project power without exposure. Kamali's legend was no accident. It was built operation by operation, a ledger of crimes balanced by fear and precision. By mid-1994, Kamali's activities had drawn too much light. Intelligence files from Washington to Tel Aviv bore his name in bold ink. The once anonymous courier was now catalogued as a high-value operative whose reach extended across continents and alliances. The CIA placed him under a category reserved for international hostage financiers. Interpol circulated red notices, citing forgery, smuggling, and terrorism. His photograph, a grainy passport copy, was pinned in embassies across Europe, a reminder that shadows were now global threats. Israel's Mossad tracked him relentlessly. For them, Kamali was not just another militant. He represented a bridge between Hezbollah's Lebanese roots and European safe havens. Every kidnapping traced back to him was also a challenge to Israel's silent deterrence. European agencies felt the pressure. Italy, France, and Germany each had open case files linking Kamali to smuggling networks. Yet bureaucracy stalled action. He moved faster than committees, exploiting borders, slipping through cracks where paperwork always lagged behind pursuit. By 1995, his name appeared on the U.S. State Department's official terrorism watch list. He was banned from international flights, though aliases kept him airborne. He was flagged in airports, Though bribes smoothed passage, he was wanted, but never captured. For Kamali, notoriety was paradoxical. Every blacklist raised his stature among militants, feeding the myth of invincibility. But with fame came danger. To intelligence services, he was no longer an irritant. He was an infection to be excised with precision. The first known attempt came in late 1995. A roadside bomb detonated near Kamali's convoy in southern Lebanon. 3 vehicles were reduced to burning metal. Yet Kamali, traveling in a decoy car, emerged unscathed, his survival feeding his aura of invulnerability. In 1996, a Beirut apartment safehouse was rigged to explode. Mossad operatives allegedly planted the device under cover of night, triggered by remote signal. Kamali had departed hours earlier. Witnesses later claimed he left suddenly, guided by inexplicable intuition. By 1998, assassination methods grew subtler. An intercepted package intended for Kamali contained a pen laced with ricin. The toxin could kill within hours of skin contact. The parcel never reached him. Hezbollah's counterintelligence discovered it during routine inspection. Drones entered the hunt in 2001. Israeli surveillance craft tracked Kamali during a funeral procession in Nabatea. Yet dense crowds deterred a strike. Operatives feared civilian casualties would overshadow the mission. Kamali walked under the drones' silent gaze, untouched and unaware. In 2003, an operation nearly succeeded in Damascus. Kamali's drink at a cafe was allegedly spiked with a slow-acting poison. Hours later, he collapsed, but Syrian doctors stabilized him. The incident was never confirmed publicly, but whispers blamed foreign hands. Each failed attempt tightened the noose. Kamali became more cautious, rotating safe houses, varying routes, and employing food tasters. Yet he also became more reckless in operations, as if survival itself emboldened him. To his enemies, he was a ghost, slipping past crosshairs. By the mid-2000s, Kamali's existence resembled a countdown. Each sunrise carried the weight of possibility, each hotel check-in an unspoken wager with fate. Survival had become less miracle than mathematics, probabilities shifting, narrowing, and inevitably aligning against him. He sensed it too. Associates recalled him musing that no fighter dies old, only remembered. His laughter was brittle, as though mocking destiny. Yet every glance over his shoulder betrayed what bravado concealed. He was already living inside crosshairs. Intelligence services, meanwhile, waited patiently. Each failed strike only refined their methods. Surveillance files thickened, routines crystallized, and patterns emerged. To hunters, inevitability was not despair, but strategy. They knew the wolf would eventually step into the trap. In this narrowing circle, Kamali's choices grew fewer. The man who once commanded shadows was now stalked by them. His legend swelled, but legends are brittle armor. Inevitability was no longer an abstract. It was already sharpening its blade. Lebanon in the 1980s and 1990s was not merely a battlefield, but a chessboard for regional powers. Civil war fractured the nation into sectarian enclaves, while Israel, Syria, Iran, and Western states each carved influence, turning villages into proxy arenas. Hezbollah emerged from this crucible. Backed by Iranian money and ideology, it positioned itself as both protector and avenger of Lebanon's Shia population. For many, Hezbollah was not terrorism, but resistance, a shield against occupation and a voice against marginalization. Israel, meanwhile, regarded Hezbollah as an existential threat. Its fighters ambushed Israeli patrols in southern Lebanon, detonated roadside bombs, and kidnapped soldiers. Every clash amplified the cycle of reprisal. Each strike hardened positions, erasing the space for diplomacy or neutrality. The United States entered the fray after a string of embassy bombings and hostage crises. To Washington, Hezbollah represented not just local militancy, but global terrorism. Sanctions followed, intelligence coordination intensified, and the movement was branded an extension of Iran's reach. Syria's role added complexity. Damascus wielded Lebanon as leverage in its rivalry with Israel, tolerating or controlling militant groups as bargaining chips. Hezbollah operated with Syrian acquiescence, its weapons and fighters moving through corridors watched but never fully obstructed. In this environment, Figures like Kamali thrived. The chaos offered cover, the rivalries offered patrons, and the fractures offered opportunities. His life was not an aberration, but a direct product of a geopolitical storm that blurred legality, morality, and sovereignty. For Iran, Hezbollah was the crown jewel of its regional strategy. Through financial lifelines, training camps, and weapons pipelines, Tehran cultivated the group as both deterrent and dagger. Operatives like Kamali were seen as guardians of an axis defying Western influence. Israel's stance was starkly opposite. Hezbollah kidnappings and rocket attacks were not irritations, but existential alarms. Kamali's name, tied to hostage negotiations and smuggling, made him a prime target. To Tel Aviv, eliminating him was not revenge. It was national security calculus. The United States placed Hezbollah on its list of terrorist organizations in 1997, formalizing years of quiet hostility. Kamali was folded into dossiers circulated among agencies. Washington saw him as an architect of abductions that humiliated American diplomacy during Lebanon's turmoil. European governments walked a tightrope. France, Italy, and Germany condemned Hezbollah's violence, yet maintained channels of dialogue, wary of destabilizing Lebanon further. Kamali's presence in European hotels and cafes embarrassed these governments, exposing the thin line between diplomacy and complicity. Syria adopted ambiguity. Damascus allowed Hezbollah freedom of movement, using it as leverage in negotiations with Israel. Syrian intelligence occasionally clashed with Kamali's networks, but more often, it tolerated him. He was a pawn and a bargaining chip simultaneously. This mosaic of positions meant Kamali's survival or death carried consequences far beyond Lebanon. Each state projected its fears and ambitions onto him. He was not merely a man but a mirror, reflecting the rivalries shaping the Middle East's fragile balance. Fahad Kamali was not the highest-ranking Hezbollah commander, nor the loudest ideologue. His significance lay in the shadows he managed. He bridged militants in Lebanon with smugglers in Europe, creating arteries of money, weapons, and information that defied borders. Unlike frontline fighters, Kamali understood logistics. He knew wars were not won by bullets alone, but by the flow of resources sustaining them. His networks ensured hostages translated into cash, smuggling translated into arms, and alliances translated into survival. He also embodied deniability. Leaders could disavow kidnappings, but Kamali was the intermediary ensuring outcomes. He was the man who whispered demands, adjusted figures, and balanced risks. His invisibility allowed Hezbollah to gain leverage without overtly shouldering blame. For intelligence agencies, Kamali was a keystone. Remove him, and the arches of kidnapping, smuggling, and ransom might collapse, or at least destabilize. His elimination promised not just retribution, but disruption of the machinery sustaining Hezbollah's European outreach. Symbolism amplified his importance. Each survival against assassination reinforced his legend among militants. He became proof that enemies could be defied. His death, therefore, would not only weaken infrastructure, it would puncture morale, dismantling myth with the finality of silence. In espionage calculus, Kamali mattered because he blurred lines. He was militant and businessman, zealot and pragmatist, predator and accountant. Neutralizing him was never about one man. It was about striking the delicate web connecting ideology to infrastructure, shadow to statecraft. In October 1994, Milan's Malpensa airport welcomed passengers with the usual chaos of luggage carts and cigarette smoke. Among them were 3 travelers using forged passports, an Irish businessman, a Canadian consultant, and a Swiss art dealer. None existed. All were Mossad. The operatives arrived separately, boarding different flights, each trained to blend into the fabric of European anonymity. They carried no weapons, only innocuous suitcases containing false documents, coded notes, and devices concealed so well they passed even routine customs inspections. Their mission was clear: locate Fahad Kamali, confirm his presence, and prepare the stage for elimination. Intelligence suggested he had entered Italy days earlier, traveling under an alias. Surveillance placed him at Hotel Excelsior, a luxury refuge near Milan's center. Check-ins were staggered to avoid suspicion. The first operative reserved a corner suite under the name Daniel O'Connell. The second booked a modest single room, never speaking to staff beyond nods. The third claimed residency at another hotel, ensuring plausible distance. Local assets provided cover stories, arranging taxis, credit cards, and even forged business letters. Every alias had a paper trail. Milan's busy autumn season made the city an ideal cloak. Too many visitors, too many faces, too much noise. By the time Kamali ordered his first espresso in the hotel bar, his hunters were already in place. They were shadows, watching, listening, waiting. The wolf had entered the trap, though he had yet to notice the silent jaws closing. Hotel Excelsior was designed for discretion. Marble floors muted footsteps, staff perfected silence, and privacy was sold as luxury. Kamali believed he was invisible here. What he did not know was that Mossad had already transformed the hotel into a stage. The first operative befriended front desk clerks, posing as a businessman curious about clientele. Small bribes yielded guest lists and room assignments. Within hours, confirmation arrived. Kamali was checked in under the alias Fahad Kamali, occupying a suite on the 5th floor. The second operative posed as a photographer, wandering corridors with a camera case concealing miniature recording devices. He installed them in air vents and under hallway skirting, mapping Kamali's comings and goings with meticulous precision. Each movement became a plotted dot. The third operative monitored from distance, frequenting the hotel cafe with newspapers. His role was to blend into background noise, observing arrivals and visitors. Cigarette smoke, clinking glasses, and idle chatter became cover for the silent logging of Kamali's associates. Together, their system created a perfect circle. Every entry, every late-night call, every room service order was documented. Even the rhythm of Kamali's footsteps was noted. Surveillance was no longer passive. It was the construction of inevitability. What Kamali believed was sanctuary had already become his cage. Each polished surface reflected not security, but exposure. His hunters did not rush. They watched, recorded, and waited for the moment when observation could transform into execution, without leaving a trace. On October 12, 1994, Milan woke beneath gray skies, the streets humming with morning trams and espresso machines. Inside Hotel Excelsior, Kamali began his day with routine precision. Black coffee, phone calls, and brief glances from his balcony at passing taxis. Operatives followed without overt moves. One lingered near the lobby, pretending to review contracts. Another tracked Kamali's phone booth usage, noting numbers dialed but not conversations. The third monitored external entrances, ensuring no unexpected guests disrupted the delicate choreography unfolding. By noon, Kamali met a contact in the hotel restaurant, a man believed to be a courier from Damascus. Their exchange lasted 40 minutes. Documents were passed discreetly inside a folded newspaper. Operatives photographed the moment from 2 concealed vantage points. Afternoon hours passed in silence. Kamali returned to his suite, drawing curtains tightly. Surveillance microphones captured pacing, muffled phone calls, and the clink of glass. His movements suggested tension. Hunters sensed the window narrowing. The longer he remained, the higher the risk. At 6 p.m., a decision crystallized. The operation would proceed that night. Teams synchronized watches, rehearsed cover stories, and confirmed escape routes. Every variable, from elevator timings to hallway patrols, was calculated. Kamali's fate was now scheduled with surgical precision. Evening descended with a veneer of calm. Guests dined, music drifted from the bar, and the marble lobby gleamed beneath chandeliers. Kamali, unaware, prepared for solitude. Outside his suite, silence thickened. The hunters had closed in, and history tightened its grip. The operatives carried no guns, no blades. Their arsenal was subtler. Lockpicks disguised as pens, syringes hidden within fountain bodies, and electronic bypass kits no larger than cigarette lighters. Violence was minimized. Invisibility was the essence of success. Entry to Kamali's suite hinged on a custom keycard reprogrammer. The device, tucked inside a pocket calculator shell, exploited the hotel's outdated magnetic locks. Within seconds, the door clicked open. silent, precise, indistinguishable from routine maintenance staff access. Inside, the team employed sound-dampening pads on shoe soles, moving like whispers across carpet. A handheld thermal scanner confirmed Kamali was alone, his body heat pulsing faintly beneath bedsheets. The room itself was frozen in stillness, waiting to be rewritten. The chosen tool was chemical, not ballistic. A vial of succinylcholine, clear, odorless, nearly undetectable in autopsies. Injected in small dose, it induced respiratory failure that mimicked heart attack. To investigators, the death would appear natural, a cruel trick of biology. Supporting devices reinforced the illusion. A disposable stethoscope confirmed shallow breathing. Latex gloves ensured no fingerprints. Even the injection needle was engineered for subtlety, leaving a mark barely visible to naked eyes. Technology turned death into a sleight of hand. As operatives moved inside the suite, a sudden sound shattered the stillness, footsteps echoing in the hallway. A guest fumbled with keys 2 doors away. For an instant, the hunters froze, every breath suspended, waiting for silence to return. Moments later, the hotel phone rang unexpectedly. Kamali stirred, half awake, muttering. One operative steadied his hand, syringe hidden, pulse racing. Timing was collapsing into chaos, yet fate intervened. The call ended quickly, and Kamali settled back into restless sleep. The mission teetered between exposure and triumph. A single corridor door opening, a curious maid entering. Even a flicker of misplaced sound could unravel years of intelligence. Espionage is never heroic. It is terror restrained by discipline's iron grip. Yet discipline prevailed. Footsteps faded, phones silenced, and the world outside remained oblivious. Inside, hunters regained composure, synchronizing movements. Each second stretched like an hour, yet each was also a step closer to finality. Suspense tightened its knot, then yielded to inevitability. The syringe pierced quietly, a needle sliding beneath skin with surgical delicacy. Kamali exhaled faintly, a sigh mistaken for dream. Within moments, succinylcholine spread through his bloodstream, silencing muscles, halting breath. To outside eyes, it was sleep surrendering to eternity. Operatives worked quickly. One adjusted the sheets, another placed a half-finished glass of water on the nightstand. The scene was staged as natural. A man alone, struck by sudden cardiac failure, his secrets extinguished before dawn could interrogate them. They wiped surfaces, erased prints, and pocketed stray evidence. The vial disappeared into a hollowed-out shaving kit. Within 10 minutes, the suite was restored to its original order. Death had arrived, but chaos had been denied entry. When they departed, the hallway was quiet, the hotel unaware. Kamali's body lay motionless, framed by dim lamplight. To the world, he had simply died in sleep. But beneath the stillness lingered truth. This was not mortality. It was meticulous assassination. The following morning, October 13, 1994, housekeeping staff knocked politely at Suite 512. Receiving no reply, they entered with master key. Curtains were drawn, air thick, silence absolute. On the bed lay Kamali, motionless, serene, as though merely oversleeping. At first, staff assumed natural causes. A guest struck by heart attack in foreign hotel was tragic, but not extraordinary. Yet unease settled quickly. His papers looked false, his luggage sparse, his presence inconsistent with a man of leisure. Management contacted local authorities who arrived discreetly to avoid scandal. Police officers examined the scene, noting no forced entry, no struggle, no obvious wounds. The body was collected, sealed in black plastic, and transferred quietly to Milan's morgue. Within hours, whispers spread beyond police corridors. The deceased was not Fahad Kamali, as documents claimed, but Fahad Kamali. The revelation traveled from local detectives to national intelligence, and then outward to embassies. The dead man was no ordinary traveler. At Milan's morgue, forensic doctors began examination with routine procedure. Kamali's body bore no bruises, no cuts, no external trauma. Heart appeared enlarged, lungs congested. Initial observations suggested sudden cardiac arrest, a natural end written in flesh rather than violence. Yet small anomalies unsettled pathologists. A pinprick mark on his upper arm, barely visible, raised questions. Toxicology screens were ordered, though limited by technology of the time. Results hinted at neuromuscular blockade, but levels were too faint for certainty. The official report concluded, probable myocardial infarction. Case closed, at least on paper. Yet whispers persisted. Some physicians quietly speculated the death was induced, a chemical deception designed to masquerade as natural, an invisible bullet fired through bloodstream. Italian officials debated disclosure, acknowledging assassination would spark diplomatic crisis, admitting uncertainty risked ridicule. Thus, the autopsy findings were sealed with ambiguity, a bureaucratic fog shielding truth. To the public, Kamali's death was unfortunate coincidence. To intelligence services, it was precision confirmed. Hotel Excelsior prided itself on discretion. Yet even in 1994, cameras watched lobbies and elevators. Reviewing tapes, investigators noted peculiarities. 3 guests arrived separately, checked in under different passports, but never seemed to interact, except their departure coincided within minutes after Kamali's last breath. Italian police cross-checked documents. The Irish businessman's passport bore font inconsistencies. The Canadian consultant's visa stamp referenced an airport code that did not exist. The Swiss art dealer's identity traced to a child who had died decades earlier. These discoveries ignited scandal. Newspapers hinted foreign agents had manipulated European systems with ease. Politicians demanded explanations. How had Milan become host to a covert execution staged beneath chandeliers, while Italian security watched helplessly from bureaucratic distance? Further leaks revealed that copies of the forged passports matched earlier cases tied to Mossad operations. Intelligence officers whispered connections to assassinations in Cyprus, failed bombings in Jordan, and surveillance missions in Paris. Patterns emerged, threads weaving Italy into a larger espionage tapestry. For investigators, the conclusion was inescapable. Kamali had not died alone. He was hunted. Yet proving it in court was impossible. Surveillance tapes showed shadows, not weapons. Passports showed lies, not fingerprints. The scandal became a riddle that could never fully resolve. When Kamali's true identity leaked, international headlines erupted. Hezbollah condemned Italy for failing to protect him, framing his death as state-sanctioned murder. Lebanese newspapers declared martyrdom, portraying Kamali as victim of Western collusion. Grief mixed with outrage, igniting protests across Beirut's southern suburbs. Italy found itself cornered. Officials denied knowledge of foreign involvement, yet opposition parties accused the government of negligence. Diplomats scrambled to calm Hezbollah's allies while assuring Western partners of loyalty. Milan had become ground zero of an intelligence embarrassment. Israel neither confirmed nor denied involvement. Silence itself spoke volumes. For Tel Aviv, ambiguity was policy. Mossad's reputation, however, swelled in whispers, admired by some, condemned by others, feared by all. The shadow had sharpened its teeth in Europe. Washington offered cautious words. The State Department called Kamali's death an unfortunate consequence of dangerous associations. Privately, American officials welcomed the removal of a kidnapper who had humiliated U.S. diplomacy. Yet publicly, they avoided alignment. Wary of inflaming Hezbollah's threats further, the scandal rippled into Europe. France voiced concern over sovereignty breaches. Germany tightened airport security checks. Interpol reviewed protocols for passport validation. Everyone sought lessons, though none openly admitted the operation's audacity had outpaced bureaucracy. It was espionage rewriting international etiquette. Behind Kamali's death stretched an empire without borders. Agencies like Mossad, CIA, and their rivals did not live in sunlight, but in paperwork, wiretaps, and coded cables. Bureaucracy itself became a phantom army, shuffling memos that could silently authorize death. Every decision passed through layers of acronyms and committees. Approval did not roar, it whispered. A signature on classified orders could move cash, fake passports, or an entire kill team across continents. Governments denied involvement, yet their bureaucracies pulsed with complicity. This phantom world thrived on ambiguity. Success was measured not in headlines, but in silence maintained. Failures were erased through redacted files. Agents came and went, yet the machinery endured, humming beneath embassies, airports, and hotel lobbies. It was a bureaucracy that built shadow empires. To outsiders, it appeared shapeless. To insiders, it was an iron structure disguised as vapor. Kamali's death was not simply Mossad's triumph. It was the triumph of systems designed to kill invisibly while looking administrative. Within the phantom bureaucracy lived invisible legions, elite units whose names rarely surfaced in public. They were dossiers given flesh, mythic archetypes moving in silence. Each squad carried reputations like weapons, their histories spoken in hushed tones across intelligence briefings. Keystone, Mossad's assassination teams, were whispered about like urban legends. Trained to vanish into cities, they carried tools that killed without spectacle. They were hunters who smiled as tourists, drank as businessmen, and slipped past surveillance with the grace of smoke. Western counterparts had their own ghosts. CIA's Special Activities Division, Britain's SAS liaison cells, France's DGSE Action Service, each filled the same role. Soldiers stripped of flags, answering only to shadows. Their existence blurred lines between armies and myths. For Kamali, it was these legions that hunted, not armies with banners, but invisible predators with patience. They were wolves in suits, saints of silence, architects of denial. Their work was not celebrated. It was whispered, feared, and remembered only in fragments. In 1973, Mossad agents slipped into Lillehammer, Norway, believing they were striking a mastermind of Munich's massacre. The target fell on a quiet street, only later revealed as an innocent waiter. The mission unraveled, leaving embarrassment etched into intelligence folklore. In 1988, Tunis awoke to news that Khalil al-Wazir, known as Abu Jihad, had been gunned down in his villa. His wife heard whispers in the hallway before bullets tore the silence. Israel never admitted it, but history remembers otherwise. In 1990, a Paris hotel became stage for another mystery. A dissident scientist tied to weapons programs was found lifeless in his bathtub. Authorities cited heart failure, yet whispers of injected poison spread through embassies, another puzzle left unresolved in files. Each operation left echoes, unfinished sentences in the history of clandestine wars. Some ended with precision, others with scandal, yet all reinforced the same truth. States could kill beyond borders, erase evidence, and still claim innocence behind diplomatic curtains. Kamali's death in Milan joined that lineage. It was not an isolated act, but another vignette in Espionage noir, a continuation of ghosts rehearsing old scripts. Assassinations may differ in method, yet their echoes always sound the same. Behind every shadow stood men in suits, leaders who signed orders with trembling pens. They were not omnipotent gods, but flawed masters, haunted by politics, vanity, and fear. Yet their signatures summoned legions, their silence sanctioned death disguised as coincidence. Kamali's end was their orchestration. Leaders smiled publicly at summits while privately authorizing invisible wars. They were puppeteers pulling strings dipped in blood, hiding hands behind flags. In their world, morality bent easily, truth drowned quietly, and power thrived in denial. Espionage gods ruled not through glory, but through shadows. Kamali's body returned to Lebanon under heavy guard, coffin draped in Hezbollah's yellow banner. Crowds filled Nabatia's streets, chanting martyrdom hymns. His funeral became spectacle and sermon, a performance of grief woven with defiance. Each tear was also a clenched fist. Hezbollah framed his death as sacrifice. Leaders spoke of betrayal in Milan, accusing foreign powers of cowardly murder. Posters bore his image, transforming him from operator to legend. Within hours, his myth eclipsed his reality, a ghost sanctified in political theater. For Italy, the funeral was humiliation. A foreign corpse had become an international rallying cry. Western diplomats worried about reprisals. Journalists scrawled headlines of hotel assassination. The stage Kamali once controlled in shadows now played publicly in headlines. His immediate impact was paradoxical. He was gone, yet his absence amplified his presence. Hezbollah gained sympathy, recruits, and renewed funding. What was intended as surgical elimination risked becoming propaganda gift, proof that enemies feared the wolf enough to hunt him abroad. In the years after Kamali's death, Hezbollah adapted swiftly. New operatives filled his logistical networks, smuggling routes reopened, and kidnappings continued. Assassination removed a man, not the machinery. Shadows simply reorganized, proving that martyrdom could be weapon as much as bullets. Yet absence left cracks. Kamali's meticulous bookkeeping, his discipline in compartmentalization, could not be replicated easily. Successors erred, exposing cells to infiltration. Intelligence agencies exploited these gaps, striking harder at networks that once thrived under Kamali's obsessive structure. His death destabilized efficiency. For Europe, the Milan assassination forced reforms. Hotels tightened guest protocols, border agencies modernized passport checks, and counterintelligence began to map Hezbollah's financial veins. Kamali's end became a lesson that vulnerability was not only local, but continental. In geopolitics, his removal hardened positions. Hezbollah embraced martyr narratives. Israel sharpened covert policies. Western states deepened cooperation. The long-term consequence was paradoxical. Peace talks narrowed, but intelligence alliances expanded. Kamali's death became both a fracture and a bond in global shadow wars. In the end, Fahad Kamali's death changed little in the grand scheme of geopolitics. Kidnappings continued, wars raged, and alliances shifted. Yet his story revealed the hidden world, where governments sanction killers, hotels become battlegrounds, and truth suffocates beneath diplomatic silence. Espionage thrives not in victories but in erasures. Kamali's elimination was less about justice than about maintaining balance in a game without rules. History forgets the paperwork, the operatives, the morgues. What lingers is the chill, reminder that power's sharpest edge gleams longest in the shadows.